so many legends in this building today.
Hi, I'm Kevin Jonas Sr., and you're listening to the legendary I Lived It podcast. Today's guest is David Pack. You probably know him from the supergroup Ambrosia from the 70s. They were trend-setting, record-breaking, had some of the biggest hits. He also happens to be one of my dearest friends. David, welcome to the show. We have one of my lifetime friends, Grammy Award-winning, multiple award-winning, incredible songwriter, producer, artist, more than any of that, truly a brother for me. Would you please welcome David Pack? David, how are you today?
Hey, good. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you. Good to hear from you.
So good to see you. Now, for those of you that don't know David Pack, you probably know, especially if you are my age or beyond, you would know the group Ambrosia and their impact on the 70s and 80s, and beyond that, David's impact as a writer, producer. But David was the key songwriter, vocalist, guitarist for the progressive rock band Ambrosia and their many, many hits, and went on to, of course, write for others. Couldn't be happier to have him as a friend, but also here on our podcast. So, David, really, thank you so much for being a part of this for us.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so glad we got this going. I love this. It's great. I want to say in return, what a great friend you've been to me. So I'm especially honored that you're doing this podcast with me. It's really, really a thrill to be here with you today.
Thank you. I was thinking back to how we actually met. I was working with a young lady who was an artist of mine, but we actually met. You came up to our offices when we were officing in Burbank.
Yeah.
And we sat together and talked about a project, and it didn't take long before we were fast friends.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So I would like to go like way back. Like let's go back to the beginning. Why don't you tell us how you got started in music? Because you have become so prolific over so long a period of time. What was it that started this journey for you?
Well, Kevin, it was my dad, watching him sing in a church choir as a little boy, wanting to be like my dad, I think was really an early inspiration. It's like, hey, that's my dad up there. I'm like 8 or 9 years old, and hearing him sing his heart out, and and the fact that he was in an accordion orchestra, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of an accordion orchestra?
No, I've never even heard of an accordion orchestra. Well, what exactly is an accordion orchestra?
It's all accordions.
That's a lot of wind.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's tenor, alto, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, SAT.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I think my dad played the bass accordion, and but they were doing stuff like Tchaikovsky. It was serious.
Oh yeah.
Classicals,
It's a keyboard.
Yeah, and so Dad would get out his accordion on the weekends, and we'd do like a sing along. And he had a little ukulele, this cool little Martin ukulele, an ukulele.
Oh yeah.
Finally, he got around to showing me a couple of chords and a song, like Ain't She Sweet on the ukulele. And I drove my parents crazy with the only 2 songs that I knew playing on the ukulele. But I sang at an early age too. There's actually a recording of me singing at about 6 years old. And my first song, they had one of those booths where you could go called You Record.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I got a record of me singing the song "Do Lord" at the age of 6. So
that's amazing. I remember those. You could go in, they would record you, and you'd leave with like a disc, not a compact disc, an actual vinyl disc.
A vinyl disc, just like Elvis did with "That's All Right, Mama." And so mine was "Do Lord" at age 6. And anyway, just I think music I connected with right away. music in my household. My mom was from Oklahoma. Came out when she was 16 from Oklahoma, and so there was the country influence. You know, we watched Grand Ole Opry on TV. Influenced by Ricky Nelson show, Ozzie and Harriet in the late 50s, early 60s. I was a Ricky Nelson fan, and I've never wanted to admit that until I learned that Bob Dylan was also a Ricky Nelson fan.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a fan of pop, for sure.
Well, he really was a great singer and an earnest performer, you know. There was
and
really
passionate fans.
So lots of influences, you know, watching guitar pickers on Grand Ole Opry, Joe Mapes, Chet Atkins, and finally learning a few chords on guitar. So the Pack household was full of music, and on Sundays watching my dad sing, you know.
So David, I want to move forward just a moment. You mentioned that you had the privilege of working with one of my all-time favorites, Alan Parsons. And of course, the Alan Parsons Project was a big part of the 70s for me as well. How did that connection come about?
Well, again, this gentleman we met at the Hollywood Bowl, Gordon Perry, the English, he became like our George Martin in a way. He loved Ambrosia. He believed in us so much. He spent his money to help us. He gave us his time. He worked at a recording studio in Vienna, Austria, that held all these great microphones, and he had them shipped out to Los Angeles, to North Hollywood, to our studio, so we could use Neumann M50 microphones. And anyway, He helped us make our first album in a way. He added to it a lot. And when he heard the finished album, he said, there's nobody in America that can mix this progressive rock record. You need a guy like Alan Parsons at Abbey Road, who did Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And we were like, what?
Yeah.
Who? Well, Gordon, since Gordon Perry was himself kind of like the #1 classical engineer in the world, he knew other audio engineers. And he said, well, Alan is a genius. He said, take a listen to Dark Side of the Moon. So we all sat down and listened to it. And at the end of it, we were like, oh my gosh, this is the guy.
Yeah, absolutely one of the best albums of all time.
So we said, how do we reach Alan? Gordon wasn't around when we tried to reach Alan. So I just said, well, I'll just call Abbey Road. And I had to save up a stack of quarters, you know, because we didn't have long distance in the house we were living in, the band house, and go to a payphone. And I checked my 8-hour time clock difference, and I went to a payphone. I put in like, 30 quarters and called Abbey Road, and they answered. And a guy answered. I go, listen, I'm calling from America. I'm trying to reach a guy there named Mr. Alan Parsons. And the voice on the other end said, this is he speaking. I'm like, what? I mean,
are you kidding me? He was the one who answered the phone.
It was the only time Alan had walked by the office. He was on his way out to dinner, and the guy had taken a bathroom break, and he heard the phone ringing. So Alan picked up the phone and answered.
What unbelievable timing and opportunity.
True story. Alan goes, I'm speaking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Alan, this is David Peck. And I gave him the whole story. Ambrosia, we've done this album, and would you consider mixing it? And he goes, well, you know, I just happened to be coming to America, California, in fact, in 2 weeks, because the Grammys, I'm nominated for Best Engineered Album for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. So he said, yeah, I could meet with you guys. And so he came to our band house. We were living in Sylmar, California, in the Valley. We were very nervous. You know, we played in the album. You know, in English are very understated. And at the end of the record, Alan didn't say much. And we said, what do you think? We were worried he didn't like it. He goes, oh, I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And yes, I'd love to mix it. So that's how it all started.
Wait, but you were not signed.
We had signed a deal with 20th Century Fox Records.
Okay. So
Russ Russ Regan signed Ambrosia, the man who signed Neil Diamond and Elton John to MCA Records. He started a new label called 20th Century Fox, and he signed Barry White. Remember Barry White?
Oh yeah, I wish I had his voice.
Barry.
I think my wife wishes I had that voice.
Barry White and Ambrosia were his two main acts at 20th Century Fox. And so Alan came out and...
But Alan didn't come because of the record label. He came because you literally were putting quarters into a payphone and called him at Abbey Road. David, do you realize the level of hustle there is in just that piece of your story?
The level of what?
Hustle. Like, you literally created your destiny there.
I've never really thought about it that way. Thanks, Kevin.
Well, I think, look, we're at the beginning of this, but I feel like there's a flow that you see in the greats. They must do it, right? And you're one of those people, you must do it. And I know that about you. And no matter how young or old, there is a drive that makes the impossible happen, but they're not counting on luck. They're putting all their quarters into a payphone. And I think that is something that a lot of artists today could learn from. Is here you were signed, but you spent your quarters. You made that call that was, I'm sure, intimidating. I mean, Alan Parsons at that moment was at the height of his profession as a mixer.
Absolutely. No, it was something that was on my bedroom wall forever and still is in my mind, which is that great saying that persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. They're educated derelicts. You know that great saying?
Yep, absolutely.
That really hit home with me in my early teens. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And I've always had that drive.
And I think the greats always do. And they work hard. They're willing to do the opening of a PetSmart or a little coffee shop, but their eyes are on something down the road that reaches more people, and they have to. They must do it.
So true.
So what was it like as Alan Parsons, because you have to forgive me, Alan Parsons mixed your first record? Like, for me, that gives me chills. Like, what was it like to go into the studio? And I know when my sons had Chris Lord-Alge mix, and he mixed one of their key songs that I thought was special, and I turned around and went, it's perfect. I never say perfect, but it's perfect. How was it to witness that gift in action?
What a great question. Great question. Because I can honestly tell you it was revelatory. It was incredible. It was like magic. I mean, he took the record from here. I can't even go high enough. He took it to another. He took it to another place we never imagined possible.
I know what it's like when you play or you sing, and that raw material is in the hands of a master. And this is back in the day where, the faders are real. I mean, these are real boards. It's not digital. The effects are running in live motion. You're bouncing tracks. Like, I remember there were times, look, I still have cuts on my finger here from the 2-inch tape and splicing, trying to get a drum beat over to the perfect spot. Like, when you play and you hear it back going through that gift, I can't even imagine that caliber of person working on anything I've ever done.
It was stunning. And we set up a card table in the studio, and he was on the other side of the glass. We had to do something to pass the time. And this is a story that most people don't know. I'll tell you, Kevin, is that Alan is a card-bearing professional magician.
No, I had no idea.
He's a magician. He's always loved magic. So when Alan got tired of mixing, he would come in where we were playing cards and he would do magic tricks for us. And he was great. So the way he did it is he section mixed everything. But before that, he had tape machines flown in from Abbey Road. Can you imagine that?
Oh, I
Because
can imagine.
We're talking 1975, and we're talking 16 track, where you've got like 8 things stacked on one track, you know?
Right. And you're constantly bouncing. People today really don't understand the work that went into protecting the quality of sound when you're bouncing. And only the great engineers could keep the tracks and the vocals, the guitars, the drums from degradation, you know, that loss of quality.
Totally. And I mean, imagine, you know, like track 7 would say a background vocal, guitar solo, balalaika, accordion, flute, all on one track, just one track. And you have to, you know.
Yeah, you have to adjust on the fly.
So Alan section mixed. He would do like, okay, here's the introduction. Okay, he'd bring the whole band in and he'd go, what do you think of the introduction? And we'd say, that sounds good. How about a little more bass? Okay, get out of here, come back. He would readjust and we'd all walk back in. Then we'd say, great, Alan. So now we say, okay, now I'm going to do the first verse. And we did it section by section by section. And then when it was all done, then he spliced each section together and play the whole mix. Right?
Wow. Oh, wow.
But the thing is, he brought his own tape machines from Abbey Road because that's how he got those magical echo delays on Pink Floyd, like David Gilmour's guitar solo and, you know, name a song, Money on Dark Side of the Moon. How did you get that? Well, Alan had all these tricks he'd learned at Abbey Road. You know, it was the gap on the tape heads between the record and the playback head, and there's a certain amount of milliseconds delays, where if you feed the tape the right way, it creates a pre-delay on the guitar and a post. I mean, all this crazy stuff that he knew how to do. Not only that, when he came to America, he had a schematic for how to do an ADT. You know, the Beatles used ADT on everything, which is basically automatic double track. So he had the American engineer design a makeshift version of ADT so Alan could have that effect at his beck and call.
So explain to the people listening what exactly that is, because when people, I do understand. So when people double, you have it, you sing it over, and it will, you have the guide track, you double, triple, quadruple, but as you stack that track with the same voice, it adds breadth to it, dimension. It's bigger.
Singing along with yourself twice or 3 times, it gives it texture. It's ear candy sometimes. It helps to fortify a section of a song or the whole song.
So what did he do to make that automatic?
Well, at Abbey Road, they invented a thing called automatic double track because John Lennon kept saying to all these guys in their white coats, all these laboratory technology people at Abbey Road, John Lennon said, can't you guys figure out a way to automatically double track me so I don't have to sing it twice? And they figured it out. And they invented this automatic double tracking system in the analog world. And of course, I can't explain how you do it. Alan could explain it to you.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to get Alan on your podcast, Kevin. How about that?
Well, we'll do that together. Absolutely, 100%.
Remind Alan to tell you how ADT works. But he was able to explain that to an American engineer back in '75 who built our own little ADT, so that it sounded like my voice was automatic, was double tracked, when it was just a matter of tape manipulation and delaying before the signal and after the signal. So it sounded like there was two of my own voices.
With just a little bit of variance.
Yeah, Alan went to that kind of trouble to mix our first album. And when we sat and listened to the whole album, I mean, we literally were cheering and crying at the same time.
Oh,
it was the most unbelievable. I can't explain the feeling, except that it was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had. And we were practically weeping that he was leaving to go back to England. We loved him so much. And Alan went on to be nominated for Best Engineered Album for the first Ambrosia album.
How amazing is that? So, David, these stories are inspiring. And for those of us that love both sides, the art of music being performed, but also what happens behind the scenes. But I'd like to bring those who are listening to those moments where the group went from unknown to one of the most sought after and influential bands of the 70s. You had a run of hits that were written by you. You played on them. Your voice was there as the lead. And those songs lined up. Like, again, I sometimes I would tell my kids, it's hard for me to describe the impact of a movie in the 70s because Star Wars lived for years.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't surprised by the payoffs. You know, I am your father. Like, you came in and you were shocked because it wasn't ruined by the news and it wasn't ruined by the internet. And a song was not gone in 3 weeks. It lasted and had impact that carried on, and the hits became a part of your life, a section, a season of your life, like most of my middle school, most of my high school. And so you guys started having hits. Of course, the first one, Holding On to Yesterday. Tell us what it's like to write a song like that and then start entering this moment of success where the band is no longer gigging in small venues and surviving, but opening for some of the biggest bands, receiving the accolades. People were pursuing you. What was it like to see those songs, your babies, live their lives?
It was exhilarating, and it was hard work too. I mean, being on the road for the first time for months at a time, you know, is disorienting. Start missing your family about 3 months into it, and where am I? What city am I in? So you realize this is hard work. But we were happy to do it. Happy, thrilled. First show we did with the Beach Boys was, I mean, I grew up with the Beach Boys. I grew up Torrance, and Hawthorne was the neighboring city, and Beach Boys were like our local heroes. So here we are in front of 30,000 people at the Iowa State Fair, our first show with the Beach Boys.
Wow.
30,000 people, and President Ford had just spoken. And we have to go on stage after Ford and play for 30,000 people to open for the Beach Boys. I mean, it was mind-boggling. Interesting that a song like Holding On to Yesterday, like we would do our progressive rock songs and the crowd was very cool. They dug it. But when we broke into our hit song, there was a hush that came over the crowd. And interestingly, every time we played that song, every single show, it seemed to always win the crowd over, no matter who we were opening for or after we became a headline band. That song seemed to have a magic to it that I can't really explain. That feeling is hard to put into words, but you know, you feel like it's got the hand of God on it. You know, there's some kind of a touch, a special touch on that song. So I'm really grateful we had that moment. And then we transitioned from that to opening for like Fleetwood Mac. You know, can you imagine back in the days before Rumors and all that?
Oh, yeah. Still, I mean, still to this day, one of my favorites.
Yeah. And we had a great time. It was exhilarating. In 1975, 1976, we recorded our second album, which was another progressive rock record with Alan Parsons producing, and it's called Somewhere I've Never Traveled, based on a poem by E.E. Cummings with the same title. Back then, there was no internet, Kevin. There was hardly any music videos, so we were creating what you would call theater of the mind, where you would hear these sounds and, like the Beatles,
right.
Sgt. Pepper, and so forth. We were trying to create little theater pieces of the mind, and to this day, friends of mine like David Paich of Toto tells me that's one of the best albums ever made, your second Ambrosia album. Thrilling to hear that still. And Alan Parsons produced and engineered that entire record. So we made that and then toured on that record. So the 70s were really about being on that endless cycle, make an album, go on a tour, and be on the road forever,
Well, and that was about the time that I was hitting the moment in my life where your songs really became the story of my life. And the songs that were being released by Ambrosia took on, almost, as you said, a magical level of success. The biggest part of me. That's
Which
how
was
much.
That was actually 1980.
Yeah. But like How Much I Feel, You're the Only Woman, like as those songs rolled out, it was every relationship, every breakup, every former girlfriend. You were the soundtrack of my life.
Oh, I'm so glad. I hope.
No, you were.
I hope it's not painful for you.
Some of those memories are painful, but that's because you wrote a lyric that memorialized what people go through.
Well, so that's a good point, Kevin. So in 77, we transitioned to Warner Brothers Records, which was a big, big change. They were the greatest place to be in the late 70s. They had the Doobie Brothers, they had Van Halen, they had Prince.
One of the best music buildings of all time, by the way, built for music.
And it was run by music producers and A&R people like Lenny Waronker, and Teddy Templeman, who produced Van Halen and the Doobies. And these were music people, and they loved Ambrosia. They supported us. And so we made that debut album called Life Beyond LA for Warner Brothers. And I wrote the title track, which was very progressive. But then I also wrote How Much I Feel, which was our sort of breakthrough.
That's my song. That of all the songs, as a singer, that's my song.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
that remains to this day a mountain to climb as a vocalist to sing live.
It's there are great songs out there, and a lot of the hit songs they're memorable, they're easy to sing along to. But there are some songs that are very difficult songs to sing, so the artistry is high, but still have that massive commercial appeal. And that's one of those songs that, as a singer myself, even singing along to it can be a challenge.
It is intense. It was a tough decision for Ambrosia because we knew the song might be commercial success and it might leave our progressive rock fans behind. But Warner Brothers, Lenny Waronker said, do you guys want to keep being an opening act, or do you want to become a headline act? This song is going to take you.
Wow. What a great line.
It was the truth.
I think a lot of the alternative, and today what we would say alternative progressive rock bands, part of the struggle is, hey, we've built our brand, and our brand is based on about that many fans.
Right.
And the wisdom to say, if you want to be the guy people are paying to see, release this song.
Well, we decided to listen to Lenny and Warner Brothers, and they were right. And the song went to #1. And Warner Brothers put us on the road first with Fleetwood Mac for about 2 months. We had a great tour. Then they put us on the road with the Doobie Brothers. Ooh. That was life-changing.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And the Doobies, once we got to know them within about a week. They're the nicest guys ever. And they said to us, "How much are you paying for your bus?" And we said, "Well, we're paying like 10 grand a month." And they go, "Oh man, why don't you fly on our plane and get rid of your bus and we'll save you some money." We were like, "What? Really?" We thought they were joking. They go, no, come on. You can fly on the Doobie Liner with us and save yourself some money. And that's how great guys they were. So we got rid of our bus, and for the next 3 months, we traveled on the Doobie Liner. 1978.
And that's an era too where rock bands were making money. I mean, they were flying in commercial planes that were just for them.
But in this case, as my good friend Michael McDonald would tell you, it was a prop jet. And
that's funny.
I remember watching Michael do like a Hail Mary every takeoff, because it was like, is this thing going to get off the ground?
Unfortunately, there were a few bands that didn't make it because they were on planes like that.
Sadly. But let me tell you, Kevin, it was the most incredible time. And, bands that became friends, we cross-pollinated, and that's when Michael and I became good friends. We just vibed together right away and started writing songs even on the road together.
There's no question that's two of the most influential voices for me of that season. I mean, if you were to add Barry Gibb and probably, for me, 3 or 4 voices from the Eagles, that encompasses like a lot of the people I respected vocally. Michael McDonald, what an instrument.
Oh. And the Doobies were incredible. I mean, they were like a freight train, 2 drummers, each side of the stage. You got Pat Simmons singing his butt off, and you got Michael at the top of his game. And It was overwhelming. A matter of fact, to be honest with you, I used to go back to my hotel room kind of depressed. I kept saying to myself, you'll never be the singer that Michael is. For a while, I kind of just got down on myself. Then I realized, you know what? This is just an inspiration. I need to watch and learn and keep striving and try to get better and better as a singer and as a songwriter too. I mean, Michael's songs, let's face it, he wasn't just writing 3-chord pop, right, Kevin?
No, difficult songs, difficult to play, difficult to sing.
So we're talking, I want to almost call it progressive R&B pop. Mm-hmm. Progressive because the chord changes. I mean, you try to play the beginning of Minute by Minute. Try to play the changes of What a Fool Believes.
Crazy. I can't play it.
Brian Wilson said when he first heard What a Fool Believes, he was frightened. It was so good. And because he couldn't figure out the counterpoint that Michael was using on those chord changes. Brian said it blew his mind. He could hardly take it. So
I used to sing that song minute by minute by minute by minute, and then I would continue by minute by minute by minute, and you could do it almost the entire song except for those changes.
And a person is one of the greatest singers of all time when every singer on planet Earth is doing a Michael McDonald imitation, right?
Oh, my dream voice. Everybody who knows me knows that raspy tone, that smoky tone, I wish I had. The Kenny Rogers, the Michael McDonalds.
Yeah.
But I can relate more to your voice. There's just there's raspy, like I've smoked a pack, I drank a little bit too much, here it comes out. And then there's butter. There's that velvet, like honey tone. Like the tone is pure, and it's just as difficult as raspy, but it's like a bell, and that's what you have with your voice.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm never happy with my voice, but I've learned to just try to make the best of it. And
You're one of the great singers of my entire life. No question. You remember when we met? It was one of those. I'm sitting with David Pack, and
well,
now we're friends. But when we first met, I'm a fan of great music, and you've made incredible music.
well, look at what you've done, Kevin. I mean, I so admire you. The entire arc of your life blows me away. Just blows me away.
I've done very little compared to you, my friend.
Whoa. Well, all I can say is bravo to you. And I think having conversations like we're having, where we talk about the substance, and dive deep, is going to help a lot of musicians in the future. You know, a lot of up and coming musicians.
I hope so. I think I had, as you know, some medical difficulties. And at the beginning of that journey, I was nervous. I felt like there was something wrong, and there was. It was cancer. And as I was going under, the doctor said, "We have Pandora. What calms you down?" And I said, "Can you play 70s rock for me, please?" And he was like, "You want 70s rock to calm down?" I'm like, "Just play me 70s rock. Give me Ambrosia, right? Give me the Doobie Brothers. Give me the Eagles. Close it out at the end with, the Bee Gees on their second run." Like, to me, that's some of the best music ever created because it was intricate. There was harmony, there was melody, there was live musicians who could really play. And I think there's a lot to be learned. I raised my kids on it, as you know. And it's influenced their life and their writing.
Incredible. And what an incredible job you've done with your boys. Incredible. Just you and Denise are inspiring Stacy and I, and we have a 14-year-old son. And what an inspiration to see how you guys have raised your boys. Just incredible.
Well, coming from you, it's hard to even accept that, but thank you. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the music they make. And there was a season of their life where people, just like what you're talking about, where people viewed them as young or Disney or boy band. And I'm like, yeah, his voice hasn't changed, but go break down that song, Hollywood. Break that down and you tell me whether that's a easy song or not, whether that's boy band or polished pop or not. They're writing those tunes. Those are coming out of them. I don't care what you say. Love Bug is a masterpiece. And that's as a guy that doesn't say that even to some of my friends with legendary songs. Like, I recognize when it's good. I'm okay if it's just okay. But when good or great comes along, and we grew up in a day where some incredibly gifted gifts from above were here on earth. Some were troubled, some made it, some lasted, but we were here to benefit from Carole King.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we were here to benefit from you, my friend. And Kenny Rogers, who's no longer with us. So, David, you had one of those legendary runs, and like all things, change comes. It came for my sons after their first run, and I'm thankful they're back together. I'm thankful they had their solo success between.
Yeah.
And their opportunities. But sometimes when we leave those moments, that transition, for whatever cultural reason that might bring it about or relational reason, we're now back to what we discussed before, which is time to survive. That I must do it because this is me. So what happened following your departure from Ambrosia? And of course, I know some of the many things you've done, but what happened after that? And how did you end up going from that to working with some of the greatest talent the world has ever known?
I mean, the season came, after 1982, our album Rhode Island. We actually discovered Bruce Hornsby while we were on tour with the Doobies, and Michael McDonald and I tried to help Bruce get his career started. And Bruce actually did some live shows with Ambrosia back then. But the band,
That's amazing.
We were very divided on which way to go. And it was obvious we needed to take a sabbatical. And I made a solo album. But I also, at that time, I was with a management company called Fitzgerald Hartley, who managed Toto, as one of their big bands. They basically, they introduced me to Quincy Jones because they shared an office with Quincy. And I had a one-on-one with Quincy because he found out that I knew Leonard Bernstein. And Quincy said, "Oh my gosh, you've got to introduce me to Leonard Bernstein." I said, "Of course, consider it done." And I said, "Quincy, I'm in a time in my life when I don't know what the next move is." He goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, "You sang and wrote and produced those Ambrosia big hits." He goes, "Those are classics." He goes, "My wife, Peggy Lipton, that's her favorite song, the biggest part of me." He said, "Why don't you produce other artists?" And I said, "Quincy, how to start?" He goes, "Why don't you produce Patty Austin for me?" I'm like, "Okay." Woo. He gets on the phone and he calls Ed Eckstein and says, "David's going to produce Patty Austin." Bam, done. Another person who changes your life with one phone call, one meeting.
Wow.
The great Quincy Jones.
And put you together with an amazing vocalist.
Quincy Jones, another incredible person came into my life. I mean, I'd say basically I've had two music mentors, Leonard Bernstein, Quincy Jones. Doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't get any better.
Quincy started me on a career as a music producer, but also during that time, Michael McDonald left, the Doobies broke up. So Mike and I became, for lack of a better term, I call it like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Mike might say we were Starsky and Hutch. I don't know. but I guess the word is we just really we gravitated to our friendship. We were just dear friends. Our families were united. Mike's mom was our travel agent, but she also, whether there was a wedding or a baby shower, it was the Packs, the McDonald's getting together. We became family. And not only that, Mike supported me as a brother, and I supported him. Many nights we'd stay on the phone 3 hours. And it was like therapy, and having your best friend help straighten your head out when you were feeling kind of depressed. And so we really did intertwine our lives. For that, I'll always be grateful.
Yeah.
And just as he was transitioning to a solo career, I was too, but I also started producing other artists. And at my lowest point, when I was feeling kind of depressed, when my solo album, we actually had a couple of top 10 AC hits, but it didn't really set the world on fire in 1985. And Michael called me and said, "Why don't you go on the road with me and do a couple shows and take over for Robin Ford on guitar?" And I'm like, "Man, I would love to do that." And I thought it was going to be like 1 or 2 shows. Well, we ended up being on the road for 2 years together and having one of the greatest times of my life. That was around 1986, 87. And we toured America and England together. And having a brother like that in your life, I just thank God for Mike McDonald and what the friend he's been to me. I mean, it's hard to put it into words. To this very day, still one of my greatest friends. And you couldn't ask for a better friend and a brother than Mike.
We need those people in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, so we've just always helped each other out. So I also, Kevin, around this time, I started conducting and music directing big events. People started hiring me because I guess they knew I knew Bernstein, and I guess it's a long story. I started doing charity events and they put me in charge of everything. So I worked my way up, and all of a sudden I'm doing I'm the music director for Madonna's tribute to Elizabeth Taylor. And I'm conducting all the music. And then all of a sudden I'm doing this event and that event. Then in 92, they asked me to, Bernie Taupin called and said, I want you to be the music director for AIDS Project LA.
Oh,
And we're going to have Elton and Billy Joel and Barbara Streisand and Natalie Cole. And we want to do the songs of West Side Story. And we understand you're the Leonard Bernstein connection. And all of a sudden, here I am conducting one of the greatest artists in the world in front of 10,000 people. That was a real high point for me, which then, that show was so successful, doing all of my arrangements of the songs of West Side Story, that I got asked to do music direct President Clinton's first inauguration, the Arkansas Ball. And so who did I call? I called Michael McDonald, right? And my friend Kenny Loggins and Patty Austin, who's I had produced 2 of her records at that time. And Bruce Hornsby, got him in on it. And Eric Clapton's rhythm section at the time was Greg Fillinganes and Nathan East and Steve Ferroni. And here I am on stage, music directing, one of the biggest events of a lifetime, in front of 1 billion people. The president dancing to me singing Biggest Part of Me. That I will never forget.
That's just beautiful. And from what I understand, that was one of their favorite songs.
It turned out to be. I mean, I told the inaugural committee, I said, I'd like to sing my song Biggest Part of Me for the first presidential dance. And they said, well, we'll get back to you. We don't know if that's possible. Well, they never got back to me. so I went ahead and did it anyway. Can I tell you a quick funny story related to that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
This is a legendary true story. So I'm at the Washington, D.C. Convention Center, and the rehearsal, Kenny Loggins said, hey, why don't we go from your song, Biggest Part of Me, into my song, Celebrate Me Home? And I said, wow, that's a great idea. So we rehearsed it one time, but Kenny didn't make the rehearsal. So I had to rehearse the band. We were all very nervous being in Washington and all of the Secret Service guys. With Steve Ferroni on drums, I said, okay, here's the way it's going to go. We're going to do, make a wish, baby. Well, we'll make it come true. Then I'm going to turn to you, Steve Ferroni, and I want you to go 1, 2, 3, transitioning from 4/4 to 6/8, right?
Right.
You follow me?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I told Steve, it's going to, you're the linchpin here. You've got to give us the groove to go into Please Celebrate Me Home, right? Which is in 6/8, right?
Yep.
And so we rehearsed it, and it went just fine. But on the night when Clinton was standing in front of us, my dear friend Steve Ferroni, who went on to drum with Tom Petty for 25 years.
Right.
Well, I'm singing The Biggest Part of Me, and the Clintons are right in front of me. And the minute I sang, make a wish, baby, President Clinton turned around to me and he said, I love that song. And I'm like, wow, cool. So the Clintons are dancing. I'm finishing up, and I turn around to Steve and I give him the cue, 1, 2, 3. And I look in his eyes, and I could see he doesn't have it.
Right. I don't know where we're going.
So he keeps playing in 4/4 while the rest of the band start playing in 6/8. And you got Kenny going, please celebrate me home, right? And Kenny's looking around, and the Clintons stopped dancing. It was what you call a train wreck.
Yes, I've been part of those.
And of course, it became so legendary. Whenever those musicians got together and do a studio session, they would try to recreate the train wreck. But anyway, that's amongst us artists. That was something we'll all never forget.
Well, one of the projects you worked on is also connected to one of my most influential artists, and that's the tribute Andre Crouch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about that project, because when he died, it rocked me. I was actually, my wife was a little worried about me because Of course, one of the gospel greats, maybe the gospel great, as a writer and composer and vocalist and choir director. I mean, he was such an influence. But what an incredible project to lead.
Well, the truth is, I didn't, probably not enough time in this podcast to tell you everything, but before Ambrosia made our first album, we were working at Mama Joe's Studios, Freddie Piro out there, who had a Christian label called Good News Records. And Andre Crouch was recording at his studio in North Hollywood, corner of Lankershim and Roscoe. And so he said, I want you boys to study how Andre makes his records. So you can learn something before you make your first album. And we studied Andre, and Andre ended up using us on some of his albums.
Are you kidding?
Back in 1974, we were playing
Andre Crouch and the Disciples.
Yep. That's where we met Sandra.
Yep.
We met Danny Bell. Do you remember Danny Bell?
Of course. Love.
Met Bill Maxwell. Remember Bill Maxwell, the drummer?
Oh, of course.
And we studied those records as a group, and then he ended up using us on some of them. And Andre started telling us his life story during that time and kind of witnessing to us and blew us away. And so I developed a lifelong friendship with Andre as a result.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, when they asked me back 4 years later to do President Clinton's second re-inauguration and music direct that, I decided I wanted to open it with Andre Crouch and Sandra Crouch. Right?
Oh, man. I would love... of all the people that have passed away over the last 5 years, 6 years, the influence of his music on my life, my go-to song, if I ever sing in church, is My Tribute.
The greatest. And you know what Andre said to me, Kevin? He said, he goes, I'm so lucky because every time I sat at a piano, God gave me a song. Can you, I mean, he was speaking the truth. But his trials and tribulations, I mean, he basically said he had 9 lives. And when I met him, he'd used about 6 of those lives up,
Mm-hmm.
So the second Clinton inaugural, I had Andre Crouch and Sandra come out with the band and saying, ain't nobody do me like Jesus, right?
Woo.
That opened up the Clinton inaugural because I just said, I think we need to bless this house. And then after that, I had B.B. Winans come out and sing Yamo Be There with Michael McDonald. How about that?
Oh, Lord, help me.
It was
incredible.
The crowd loved it too. People were kind of worried, well, what's the crowd going to think if you do a gospel piece? I said, you know what? They're going to love it. And they did. So.
Oh, but it transcends just, evangelical or otherwise. His music, through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. Like, it's about life. It's about moving through life and having something to look forward to and something to carry you. Like there are very few writers like that. And a song like My Tribute puts all life in perspective.
Exactly. And not only that, look at Quincy and Michael Jackson. They used Andre Crouch. On Quincy's movie he produced, The Color Purple.
Yeah.
The finale of the whole movie is the song Andre wrote, God is trying to tell you something.
So
is that
good.
incredible or what?
So good.
And what about Man in the Mirror? That's all Andre Crouch did.
That's his choir arrangement. One of the best choir arrangements of all time.
Man in the Mirror, Andre. So Neil Joseph was running Warner Brothers Christian label in Nashville, and he heard my version of the songs of West Side Story when I did my tribute album in 1996 to Leonard Bernstein, where I spent 7 years to make that record, just to get to the starting gate, to get a record deal to make that record. Probably the thing I'm most proud of in my whole life is reimagining West Side Story and being given the okay from the Bernstein estate and Jamie Bernstein, who's been my lifelong friend, Leonard's daughter, spearheading all of that, and being able to reimagine every song from West Side Story, and having amazing superstars sing, Phil Collins, Aretha Franklin, Natalie Cole, Brian Setzer, even Little Richard did I Feel Pretty, my arrangement of that.
Oh, that's great.
Rick Going Gaines. And
what great casting that is.
So Neil Joseph heard that record and blew his mind. He said, that's one of the greatest records I've ever heard. Why don't you produce the finale to the tribute to Andre Crouch, my tribute to God Be the Glory? And I said, I would love to. So I spent months working on that arrangement, just meticulously trying to get it just right. Then when I finished the arrangement, I went to Andre's house in Pacoima. His father had just died and he was living in his dad's house. And this funky home that had bars on the windows, those like, it was like kind of scary. But there was Andre, his humble self, he had a ghetto blaster and he goes, come on, throw in that cassette, let's listen. I'm sweating, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to play.
You have to play your arrangement of my tribute to Andre Crouch.
Yeah, I'm like,
oh gosh. I'd probably pass out. I would pass out or go to heaven. That would be the end of me.
Well, I just decided to groove it, to God,
be the glory.
To God, right? The minute Andre heard that groove, he started dancing, That's when I knew I was good. When Andre started dancing, he goes, I love this, So I actually did the whole thing, the video in Nashville, and flew in Andre, got Patty Austin out there, and Andre sang it all over again on top of my track. And then we had all these guest stars, all these great Christian artists singing on top of it, and Twyla Paris and Wayne Watson and BB Winans, Patty and Andre, and recorded this kind of We Are the World video. And I'm telling you, at the end of the video shoot in Nashville, Andre said to everybody, there's about 200 people on that stage. Andre said, would you pray for me? Because I have to take over running my father's church and I don't feel that I'm capable. And everybody put hands on Andre. We were all just like crying. And we all just said a prayer that God would hold Andre up as he became the pastor of his dad's church. And I'll never forget that moment.
Wow.
It's incredible.
I can't even speak to the influence his music had. At some point, maybe Sandra would be a great guest for us to talk to, because
let's get her. I'll call her. She's incredible.
Oh my gosh. Well, her record was a breakthrough, but being a kid from a small southern town, having that kind of music around you shaped my life. I mean, truly shaped my life. Well, David, before we finish, what are you working on these days? Because a guy like you, it's never going to end. So what are you working on now that you have coming up and that you're proud of? I'd love for you to tell everybody about that as well.
Well, I mean, the last 10 years of my life have been, I spent almost a decade studying with Rick Warren, the author of Purpose Driven Life, and being a part of his church in Saddleback, and serving other people and just growing spiritually. I was so busy having a career for so many years that I didn't have the kind of spiritual growth I really needed to have. And my wife Stacy and I, we don't regret those years we spent with Rick Warren. And now we moved up to Napa Valley, and I have a 14-year-old son. So I want to be a great husband and a great father for my son. I'm concentrating on that first, right? I got my priorities right.
Yeah.
And trying to serve God in everything I do. That's having a God-centered life. It puts everything in the right focus. You know, it's not about me, it's about what I can do to help you, you know. And I'm still very driven. I have a new album that I've made up here in Napa. I have an internet company that I've invented that isn't quite launched yet, but it is the culmination of my entire life. It's going to blow your mind, and it's going to be a new royalty stream that doesn't exist for artists when I finally get to launch it. But it's hard finding the right technological people, because they're a lot different than us music people, you know, Kevin.
They are.
So I'm trying to find the right CTO to align with to finish. I'm almost done with it, but it's going to be a mind blower when it happens. I've written a song during the quarantine called "We're All We've Got," because I realized at the end of these 3 months of isolation, if we've all learned anything, it's that we need each other. You know what I'm saying? We need each other.
Absolutely.
And so I took that viewpoint. We're all we've got, you know, and the chorus even says, like it or not, we're all we've got, you know. It turns out we need each other more than we thought, like it or not. We're all we got. So, and it's an up-tempo piece. I don't know how I will distribute it to the world, but I'm almost finished with that. So I'm being very creative still in my life. I'm trying to finish my book. So, you know, help people wherever I can, doing lots of charity work, quarantine videos. I did one with actually Michael McDonald and Alan Parsons last week for a charity in Santa Barbara, and trying to make the rest of my life the best of my life, you know, just like you.
That's right. Yeah, these are our best days, my friend.
Amen.
Well, thank you for joining us, and you'll be joining us again because we're going to have some of your friends. Some I've met, some I haven't, but you've walked with some of the best artists and produced and written for some of the best artists in the world, and we'll have them on with you. But David, I count you a brother and a friend. I'm thrilled that you were able to be with us today. Thank you for being part of the start of this whole thing.
My pleasure. It's an honor for me, and I love you, my friend. Keep it going.
Love you too. Talk to you soon. God bless.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.